From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. Here is your host, Seth Clevenger.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we're going to take a fresh look at the road ahead for electric-powered commercial vehicles. Over the past few years, we've seen manufacturers introduce the first wave of electric truck models, and a select number of those vehicles are already on the road hauling freight. But how soon will electrification truly take hold in trucking, and in what applications? And what are the obstacles that early adopters will need to overcome? I set out to answer those questions at CES 2020 in Las Vegas, which featured several zero-emission truck prototypes. PACCAR showcased battery electric Kenworth and Peterbilt models at the show, while truck leasing and logistics company Ryder System had the hydrogen electric Nikola 2 tractor on display at its exhibit. During the event, I spoke with several subject matter experts from those companies to get their insights into how electric vehicles will enter the trucking industry. A bit later in the program, you'll hear from Chris Nordh, Senior Director of Advanced Vehicle Technology and Energy Products at Ryder. But we'll begin with my conversation with Peterbilt Chief Engineer Scott Newhouse. Let's go ahead and play those interviews. I'm here at CES in Las Vegas, and I'm excited to bring in Scott Newhouse, the Chief Engineer at Peterbilt. Thanks for joining, Scott.
Thanks for having us.
Now, the introduction of electric trucks has certainly been one of the more fascinating developments in our industry over the past few years. And right now we're really in the testing phase with small numbers of fleets that are deploying these vehicles, really the first wave of test vehicles that are preparing for a broader launch. But what really needs to happen to pave the way for that broader commercial rollout of electric trucks?
Well, I think a few things have to happen. One, we need to continue to get some more miles, make sure that the technology proves out as strongly as we expect. We're getting a lot of that now, as you saw in our announcement of 40,000 miles and getting a lot of good miles on even individual vehicles. So gaining that confidence is fantastic for us right now. I think the other thing is as we come out with pricing and customers understand how this technology will benefit them through their business, and they can take those benefits versus the costs and understand their payback to make them more successful. I think those things will drive the technology forward. It's not necessarily technology that will apply to all applications, but as you take a technology, like many of the technologies on our truck, proven benefits, that's what grows.
Okay. And here at CES, PACCAR has this very nice spot right at the bottom of the monorail station. And you do have a couple battery electric trucks on display here, including the Model 520 EV Peterbilt. And that's a refuse truck. Peterbilt also has two other electric models as shown in the past. There's a tractor designed for regional haul and also a medium-duty truck for urban delivery, pickup and delivery. What are the benefits of those applications for electrification?
Yeah, I think we're continue to learn all the benefits of the applications. I think it's important to understand we're not just applying technology to these trucks. We're working with customers to understand what their specific market needs, pickup and delivery, regional haul, like you mentioned. And as we apply the technology, we see that there's those opportunities to get the benefits of, again, not just quiet operation in those, but efficiency, cost efficiency, potential maintenance benefits. And those will be things that, again, will prove out as we continue to get more miles.
Okay. So, Scott, when do you plan to begin series production of these vehicles and really start to hand them over to your customers in larger numbers? I know you have pilot customers that are testing these vehicles now, but when are you looking for that broad rollout?
Yeah, we'll start to see rollouts happening by the end of this year. Specifically with our pickup and delivery Model 220, and then roll early into 2021 with our other products.
Got it. And when you consider that driver recruiting and driver retention, of course, are just such a high priority for motor carriers, how do you think drivers are going to react to electric trucks? It's a pretty select club at this point that has had a chance to get behind the wheel of one of these vehicles. Do you think drivers are going to like them, and what are the early reactions you're hearing thus far?
Well, I'll tell you, what I hear when drivers come out of these trucks is, "Oh, that was fun." Just I don't think it's about the quietness, but how smooth it is, the acceleration. I think people really enjoy the way the products are performing.
Got it. And Peterbilt's sister company Kenworth has partnered with Toyota to develop hydrogen electric trucks. And hydrogen fuel cell has become part of the conversation about zero emissions and electrification. That was the case at the North American Commercial Vehicle Show in Atlanta late last year. But what are your thoughts on the viability and potential for hydrogen fuel cell as part of the future of the industry?
Well, I think the thing about hydrogen fuel cells, and we're learning more as we keep developing that technology and getting more miles, like you mentioned. There are probably two different solutions to the different customer applications. And if you think about fuel cells providing opportunity for more of a longer range, where BEV technology is probably more regional, we can see those benefits. The other things you got to consider is how do those technologies fit on the vehicle itself, the packaging on the vehicle. And I think what's nice is having both options available for our customers. They can see what works best for them, works best for their vehicle spec, and what more importantly works best in their operations to make them successful.
Got it. And when you look at the business case for electric trucks, at least in the near term, how important are government incentives or subsidies, tax breaks, things like that? And looking further out, what's the pathway toward business cases that truly stand on their own and are comparable or perhaps even better than today's diesel trucks?
Well, I think subsidies from the governments will help, just like any technology, get it out there sooner. Gives the customer an opportunity to take a less risk, get the technology on the road, prove out its benefits. So that is always helpful. I think as far as standing on its own, those are things that will continue to prove out over time. As people do run, they know how these technologies fit in their operation. Maybe they have to even modify their operation slightly to make it more successful. They'll see the cost benefits and then ultimately realize that any additional investment up front is beneficial.
Yeah, and one new frontier for electric trucks, of course, is vehicle maintenance. And that's a big change. If you look at the vehicle architecture of a battery electric truck versus a diesel truck, and it's really a whole new animal. So just how much of a learning curve do you see for maintenance shops and technicians to learn this new vehicle type as it starts to make its way into the industry?
Well, there would definitely be a learning curve, right? And I think technicians, they understand electronics today. Applying that more broadly to the powertrain as opposed to just from more of the cab and some of the electrical accessories on the vehicle today. That will be a bit of more of the curve. That would be the learning curve. And
Sure.
there are different voltages that are things you'll have to be aware of. But I think we have great technicians in our business today, and very sharp guys and with some education. I think they'll pick it up quick and be able to be very successful.
Another big piece of the electrification puzzle is charging infrastructure. And for the early applications we're talking about, urban pickup and delivery, short haul, refuse, these vehicles will likely be charging at home base, at truck terminals rather than out on the road searching for a charging station. So really, it's going to be important for trucking companies that want to move in this direction and have a fleet of EVs to really understand the right way to charge, when to charge, avoiding peak hours to keep the overall electricity costs lower and make the operation cost effective. So how do you see fleets learning to manage that effectively?
Well, I think, again, it goes a bit to education, understanding what are the capabilities of the charging systems out there, knowing how that applies within their area and within their business. So can you afford to have a less expensive charger that might take you more time to charge the truck? That might be the better solution as opposed to an operation that is more continually running. You may have to invest more, but you get that payback by having a fast charge, gets the truck back out, making you money. So I think these are things, again, about education, learning how it applies to your application, and knowing what works best for you.
Sure, and looking a little bit further out as we start to think about applications that are more in regional and maybe even long haul someday, what will it take to reach a point where electrification, maybe that's where hydrogen fuel cell comes in a little bit more, but what will it take to really have a long haul electric truck that makes sense when you consider, of course, the added weight and cost of the batteries, which cut into payload capacity and of course, the range issue. Is that just going to rely on further innovation, cost reduction, new technology? What do you see as the path forward for long haul?
Well, I think the way I see that is from a technical side, I think we have some understanding of what that means. But more importantly, what you're really trying to do is, when it makes sense, that's the customer. The customer is going to decide what makes sense. And that's why us running the vehicles we're running today with both fuel cell as well as just all electric, that's getting that feedback and making sure we respond to feedback from our customers and apply technology. So they're going to be the ones helping us know when it makes sense or not.
Understood. And just one final thought and question to leave you with. I do think this is a really fascinating time in the history of our industry. We see the emergence of electric and zero emission trucks, and it's great to look ahead to the future, especially here at a show like CES. But what's a realistic expectation for how quickly electric will take hold in trucking? I mean, how much of the industry do you think will have moved toward electric vehicles in, say, 10 years and 20 years? A crystal ball question to leave you with.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's a tough thing to answer, right? Because there are factors. One, proving the technology to be a great business case, as well as regulation. Regulation does play a factor. So regulatory could increase the volumes very quickly just on its own. So I don't think I have any strong numbers to give you, but I will tell you about the interest we're getting from people right now about how they think it could fit in their operation, and people not just saying I want one truck, but they want multiple trucks. Yeah. And I think if we prove out the technology the way we expect, it could grow into hundreds, definitely hundreds to low thousands very quickly, and then see how it grows from there.
All right. Well, this will be very fascinating to watch, and I really appreciate you taking the time, Scott. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Here at CES in Las Vegas, and I'm very excited to welcome Chris Nordh, Senior Director of Advanced Vehicle Technology and Energy Products at Ryder System. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate the time here.
Absolutely. The emergence of electric trucks has really been a big topic of discussion in the trucking industry over the past few years, and we see that reflected here at CES. You look out in the plaza, and Peterbilt and Kenworth are showcasing zero-emission models, and over at the Ryder booth, Nikola has a hydrogen electric truck on display. So I want to get your thoughts. What's Ryder's perspective on the potential for battery electric and hydrogen electric trucks?
Well, we've seen a pretty significant transition start to take place in the consumer market with regular vehicles, and we truly expect it to go into the commercial sector very soon, starting with smaller commercial vehicles, vans, smaller trucks, and then moving its way further up into the vehicle classes, ending then obviously with Class 8 tractors.
Okay. And what are your truck leasing customers telling you about electric trucks, whether it's medium or heavy duty? Are some of them interested in leasing those types of vehicles? And if so, does Ryder plan to acquire electric vehicles to serve that demand?
Yeah, good question. So all the customers are pretty much interested. Mm-hmm. The question becomes, when does it make sense for them? And so part of our responsibility and job is to make sure that we advise them of when their particular application makes sense. And so again, starting with the smaller vehicle classes, vans and smaller trucks, specifically in certain types of applications, are well suited already today. And so you have this inner city urban environment, which based on today's larger cities, very congested, a lot of stop and go type traffic situations. And that's really where electric vehicles shine. And it's also, funny enough, exactly where internal combustion products don't do well. Mm-hmm. And so you have this perfect convergence between the newer technology internal combustion with all the after treatment systems that create a very difficult operating environment inside of cities, which is exactly where electric vehicles do so well.
So like urban distribution, commercial van, getting into light, maybe medium duty trucks, you think is maybe the best and maybe the first application that truly is really, really well suited.
Yeah, absolutely. And so perfect examples is last mile delivery, package delivery, just to name a few companies, FedEx, UPS, DHL, Amazon have truly that perfect model to start converting vehicles. And we are starting to see them convert. A lot of announcements have been made lately, including here at CES, about their plans for electrification.
Yeah, and at this stage, part of the equation, of course, is the price, and there is a price premium for an electric truck compared with a traditional diesel model. Of course, it depends, on application and the vehicle's hype, but for medium and heavy truck, I mean, most of the early deployments have been in Southern California, where there's government incentives. That's really emerged as sort of an incubation zone for some of this technology for commercial trucking. Do you think that those types of incentives are going to be required to make the business case work in those applications in the near term? Or do you see a pathway in fairly short order to get to a business case that stands on its own without government incentives?
Right. So the incentives have served a really important role in accelerating the companies going out there, creating new products, and putting them into the marketplace. California is a great example of a state that's taken a leading role in aiding the market. And eventually that's not going to be needed, and I think that it's something that may actually impede adoption. So it's great in the beginning, it'll taper off, but probably not for another few years, which, in my opinion, fits really well with what we're seeing from a battery cost perspective and overall scale, which is really what's required in order to lower the cost of not just the batteries, which is what we talk about all the time, but every component, the drive motors, the inverters, and everything else that goes into creating a complete electric drivetrain.
Let's talk about maintenance of electric trucks, and that really is a new frontier because these vehicles are really just it's just a very different type of vehicle compared with a diesel truck with an internal combustion engine. It's such a different animal. How steep is the learning curve for technicians and maintenance shops when you look at electric? How much learning and education and training has to happen on that side? Right.
And so number one is safety. You're dealing with a high voltage system that, if handled improperly, will lead to some very serious injuries, including death. And so that's the number one focus in training our technicians. And one of the great things that we're seeing is really an enthusiasm from the technicians in learning and adopting these electric vehicle products. It's a very hot topic, not just in the media, but also in regards to drivers and technicians. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually been a very pleasant experience to roll out the training programs that we already have and are in the process of continuing to do across the country for various electric vehicle platforms. Now, one of the interesting things that I see about the difficulty or the learning curve is that in the beginning it's going to take our more advanced technicians to be able to help support the diagnosing of the vehicles as opposed to the actual swapping of parts, which is fairly simple. In the future, when we start really interpreting the data coming off of the vehicle itself, we're going to be able to very quickly be able to know what is wrong with the vehicle, perhaps even before it arrives at the shop. This means that we'll be able to have lower skilled technicians or younger technicians be able to deal with these vehicles without any problems, even to the point where they will go grab the right part for the vehicle before it even arrives.
Transport topics in one word: authoritative.
Knowledge.
Outstanding.
Reliable.
We asked Transport Topics readers to describe us in one word.
Informative.
Informative.
Integrity.
The Bible.
Authoritative.
The authority.
Transportation information, that's two, but I gotta have it both.
Physically large. Oh, that's two words.
Visit influence.ttnews.com/say hello to find out what they're talking about.
Of course, diesel trucks have evolved over the years, and new emission systems and new technologies, and the job of the maintenance technician now has become very high tech, and a laptop and is one of your key tools now. It's not just a wrench. So you can imagine where it's going with electric vehicles. I also want to talk about vehicle charging. If you're going to operate a fleet of electric vehicles, you do need to plan carefully when you charge them, so you avoid peak charges. I mean, this is all part of the return on investment calculation. How do you see fleets managing that aspect of operation, making sure that they're charging a fleet of vehicles, whether it's vans or trucks, in an optimal way at the right time to make it cost effective?
Right, and this is really key in order to make the total cost of ownership equation work for a company converting to EVs. As an example, in California, you have 4 times the cost of electricity during certain hours in comparison to nighttime. So it becomes really important to have the right software capabilities to manage all that, because you don't want it to be a manual process where you wait until the right time and then you plug the vehicle in. And so we are really excited about a partnership that we've made and announced here at CES, which is together with ABB and InCharge. And the key here is that they're going to be supporting our customers in installing, maintaining the charging infrastructure for the vehicles that we are going to be leasing to them, as well as all those software controls that you mentioned in order to optimize your electric vehicle operation.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage, and certainly any tools and software that fleets could have to try to manage that new process is going to be important. And I also want to ask you about electric charging stations beyond the home terminal. We talk about application, and of course the nearest term applications are the urban distribution, the short haul, where the vehicle is probably going to be returning to the terminal and charging there. But if you look a little bit further in the future, if electric trucks will eventually work in regional and long haul applications, they'll need places to charge. They'll need charging infrastructure. Do you see that coming down the line? And what are the challenges there?
Yeah, there's plenty of challenges. So these high-powered charging stations are quite expensive, and so you need to have them occupied for a significant portion of the day in order to make financial sense of it. And so you're probably not going to see that being built out to a great extent soon, because really the return to base operation is what's going to be driving most of the probably first 10 years of EV adoption. And this is where, you start talking about hydrogen as an option instead. Mm-hmm. And we're very happy to have Nikola with us in our booth here at CES, displaying their Nikola 2 vehicle, which is a hydrogen-based electric vehicle. So the drivetrain is basically the exact same as an electric vehicle. It does have batteries. It has electric motors. But basically it stores electricity in the form of hydrogen, which it will run through a fuel cell in order to create electricity. So that's what replenishes that smaller battery pack in order to create a much longer range vehicle, even in that Class 8 category.
And that the fuel cell essentially acts as a range extender for an electric vehicle. It gets around some of the obvious limitations with today's technology with a battery electric vehicle with the range. So that's certainly something that we've seen garner some more attention. Even at the North American Commercial Vehicle Show late last year, there was a lot of talk about hydrogen as an option moving forward for trucking. But before I let you go, Chris, I do want to get your best estimates for just how quickly you think electric trucks could become commonplace in our industry. Just give me maybe snapshots of your best guess as to where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. We all know that's a crystal ball question, but what do you see in the crystal ball?
Yeah, so I see specific niche markets adopting electric vehicles very quickly. An example of that is the garbage industry, which very quickly converted from diesel to natural gas.
Right.
And that is, again, the perfect application for electric vehicles because of this stop-and-go environment. And so you're going to see last mile delivery vehicles, you're going to see potentially garbage trucks, school buses, municipal buses, and they're going to adopt very quickly. But overall trucking, making blanket statements, it's going to take a very long time. And I don't see it as one of these scenarios where it's going to completely rule out diesel vehicles. It has a specific, perfect application, and it's different than diesel. Yeah. So the two technologies are truly complementary to each other, and that is going to be the overall equation, is going to be many different types of technology solutions in order to fit each niche market. And that's how we're going to reduce the overall greenhouse gas emissions of the transportation industry in the country.
Well, it'll be very fascinating to watch this all develop and see new fuel types and new vehicle types begin to enter the market in larger numbers alongside the diesel trucks that, of course, will continue to evolve and improve as well. I do think that's a good place to leave it, but I really appreciate your insights, Chris. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Seth.
From time to time, an issue commands so much of the industry's attention that it requires a deeper dive. A resource readers can turn to. A Transport Topics special report. In 2019, we produced two. One on the rising tide of electric trucks that are promising to reshape how goods are moved down the road. We also examined trends in trucking and insurance, with particular focus on how new technologies help motor carriers eliminate risk and how this is influencing insurers' underwriting practices. I'm Joe Howard, Executive Editor here at Transport Topics, and I invite you to learn more about our special reports and reserve your copy of the next one at ttn.ws/special.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original questions. How and where will the first wave of electric trucks be deployed in the commercial transportation industry? And what are the obstacles that early adopters will need to overcome? As we've heard from our guests, there's no one-size-fits-all approach for electrification. That's because the trucking industry includes so many different applications with their own unique characteristics and requirements. In the near term, the operations best suited to electrification are urban pickup and delivery, port drayage, and refuse operations. At least in the beginning, electric trucks will most likely see gradual adoption as fleets learn more about this new breed of vehicle, including how to maintain them and recharge them in a cost-effective way. The road ahead for electric trucks is a long one, but it's becoming increasingly clear from the investments made by OEMs, suppliers, and innovators that this new segment of the commercial truck market will be an important part of our industry's future. If you've enjoyed this episode of RoadSigns, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with me and the RoadSigns team. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. We'll continue the conversation about trucking technology in 2 weeks with a fresh episode of RoadSigns. Until then, I'm Seth Clevenger. Thank you for listening.